on and off.
Okay.
It's a super easy last thing to do.
Boom, boom.
Yes. So we do have a wireless mic. When that time comes,
That's fine.
the wireless mics were there.
No, we have two people ready.
Jennifer wants a wireless mic for a month.
Oh,
I'll give her another one.
okay.
Test.
I'm gonna sneak right behind you. Ready? Yeah. Good evening. Welcome for coming thank you for coming tonight, and welcome. Whew, this group is great. It's exciting to see so many faces in here. We're always uncertain when we do something the first time what the turnout's going to be like, so it's wonderful having all of you here tonight. Tonight's event is brought to you by Community Conversations, which is a grassroots group of individuals, local community members wanting to bring educational and informational resources to the local community members. So we appreciate you being here. Wanted to let you know we are being filmed tonight, so that will be up front and then as we do the Q&A session as well. Following our session, we will have a table over here, so if you decide that you are interested in learning more about Community Conversations or participating in our group, we'll have a sign up here and a sign up sheet out there where you can just list your information and we can reach out to you about participating in the future. Tonight's role, and just to give you an idea of how it's going to work, we're going to start with our presenters. We'll then have a Q&A session that will be moderated. And so if you decide that you want to have a question, we'll ask that you hold that until the Q&A. And you can either write your question on that card and just quietly raise it, and one of us will come around and pick it up. Or if you'd like to actually ask your question, then you can do so during the Q&A time. At the end of the session, we do have resource tables out front that you saw, and those will be available until 8 o'clock. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our presenters, and they will actually be presenting from the table today. Cleo will come up because she's going to be running a PowerPoint, but the rest will be at their table, and that is Linda, who is a community parent who's been impacted. Cleo Harris is our treatment specialist from Snohomish County Human Services. Carol Cummings, Police Chief, City of Bothell, and then Ben also impacted. So thank you again for coming and welcome.
Hi, my name is Linda Tappan, and my son is a 35-year-old recovering heroin addict. Unbeknownst to me, he began his journey with drugs by becoming addicted to opioid pain pills. That eventually turned into a deep, controlling heroin addiction. This disease knows no socioeconomic boundary and is insidious with not only what happens to the addict, but also the incredible pain that it afflicts on their loved ones. Andy was raised in a stable home, had family and friends who loved him, and was provided with every reasonable opportunity to grow and to thrive. Andy is the youngest of 3 children. He was an adorable, tow-headed blonde with blue eyes, and who from the age of 3 loved to ride his bike out in the cul-de-sac and play with his friends in our quiet Bothell neighborhood. As a little guy, he was carefree and funny, and he altogether broke the mold of his more serious older brother and sister. He loved animals, almost more than anything, especially his dog Buddy. He used to sit in my lap, and he used to promise that when he got married someday, he would live down the block so that we could always remain close. I was fortunate enough to be a mostly stay-at-home mom and was happy to manage the home and drive carpools to school and extracurricular activities. And as I look back, it was pretty much a fairy tale existence in those days. But Andy grew up and got married. He had a good job and settled into what I thought was his happily ever after life. But then after a short time, everything changed. His marriage failed due to parts on both sides of the relationship. They parted on reasonably good terms. He bought a nice car for himself and moved in with a friend while trying to figure out his life as a single man again. Soon after, in hindsight, his life began to change, and not for the better. My first clue that something was wrong was that he was frequently running out of money and asking for loans that were never repaid. He explained it away by saying that he was settling things financially with his ex-wife or needed car repairs or whatever the next excuse might have been. He lost a lot of weight, and I noticed his hygiene was declining. Nevertheless, he continued to work, and eventually he found a new lady friend in his life. He'd recently quit his job, or at least I think he quit his job. I don't know, maybe he was fired, and moved in with his new girlfriend in a city about an hour away. But I was so glad that he appeared to be happy again. Please keep in mind that I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and did 1 year of a doctorate in clinical psychology, and have spent more than 10 years working with homeless families in East King County. And in spite of all that, I didn't put two and two together for many, many months. One night after an ugly breakup with his girlfriend, Andy ended up on our doorstep in tears, saying he had no place to go. What I didn't know was that she had recently introduced him to smoking heroin, which she told him that she did a few times a week for relaxation. And he tried it after he learned how much cheaper it is than pills. What I didn't know was that he was scared to death about his addiction and how he was going to be able to support it. At that point, he blamed his girlfriend for all his problems and said she'd just thrown him out. So, of course, my husband, who's Andy's stepfather, and I invited him to stay with us for a time until he could determine his next steps. Since we have very little extra space, we arranged for him to move in with his brother and wife. After he left, I discovered that all my jewelry was gone. Then I knew, and I was numb with grief. In the meantime, my oldest son realized that Andy had rifled through his wife's jewelry and confronted him about it. He denied any such thing, and he and his brother ended up parting ways. Andy then moved in with his dad, who also ended up losing a lot of money and personal items to Andy's addiction. As a family, we were all beyond devastated and felt completely at a loss about how to help Andy with his heroin addiction. Some of the family members attended an informational meeting at the Lakeside Milam Treatment Center and learned that family must not put out a safety net and try to save him. So we were all in agreement that the best way to help was to stop rescuing. His dad would no longer allow Andy to stay with him, and he had the incredibly painful experience of dropping him off at a men's shelter in Seattle. He roamed the streets of Seattle for many months, sleeping wherever he could find a spot and living each day for his next fix. All I wanted to do was rescue him and fix everything. That's what moms naturally do, right? I was always there for him when he was young, and always able to right a wrong and kiss an owie, keep him safe. The lowest point of my life was when he called me one day and said that he was hungry and he needed bus money to get to a day job. So I met him under the freeway at James Street with a bag of food and a little money for bus fare. He looked awful. Skin and bones, smelled terrible, was dirty. He was obviously miserable. But we hugged that day and we expressed our love for each other. And when I drove off, I wanted to die. The pain was unbearable and I couldn't fix it. We both knew that. As the months went by, I saw him only once when he asked for help with clothing for a job interview. So he met me in the parking lot at my office, and I gave him a Ross card rather than cash, although I suspect that he may have sold that for drug money. He was wearing shorts that day, and his skinny legs were covered with bedbug bites. I was strictly on autopilot at work. I was able to work and successfully help to house homeless families and to address the barriers that hindered their success, but I was unable to help my own son. I didn't want to answer the door or my phone in fear that someone was going to tell me that Andy was dead. The year that he was in his heavy heroin addiction seems like a blur. While we all knew that we were doing the best thing by not helping him, everybody in the family was absolutely devastated and terribly worried about him. He agreed to go to detox on 2 different occasions, but he walked out each time. And he later explained to me that it was terrifying and miserable to detox and be that sick. And besides, his dad had given him a $20 bill out of love and kindness on the times he left him there, and later Andy admitted that, boy, having that money in his pocket, he wanted to go out and have another fix, and so he would leave. He obviously was not ready to get clean. Once I heard from my oldest son that Andy had been arrested for possession of drug paraphernalia in Bothell while sitting in the Albertsons parking lot. He had other arrests after that, but I don't know what the charges were. I suspect theft. Sometimes I think that not knowing and not wanting to know is an understandable means of self-preservation. We all hear about the need for an addict to hit their own personal rock bottom before they're ready to recover. Andy eventually did hit his. He explained to me much later that he decided to commit suicide by jumping off the overpass at Madison on I-5. He was penniless, tired, sick, lonely, and he needed another fix, and felt that he could not go on any longer. He looked over the railing to make sure that there was plenty of traffic in order to kill him quickly, but saw that there were no cars on the freeway at all. Apparently, there'd been an accident and the freeway was closed for a brief period of time. Andy said that he looked up at the sky and he shook his hands and he said, "What do you want me to do?" He'd hit his bottom. Soon after, a cousin whom he really hardly knew reached out to him, called, and offered to help and offer some respite. She took him into her home and helped to facilitate yet another trip to detox. But this time he stayed. And then he got on the bus and he went to Wenatchee for a 28-day inpatient stay. He was there at Christmas time, and we all hoped for the best, but we also braced ourselves for the worst. When my son and daughter visited him there, they reported back that they'd never seen their brother happier, so talkative and more confident than he'd ever been, even before his battle with addiction. And he did some deep soul searching, and he embraced the 12-step program, and to this day attends several meetings a week. He has remained so active in the program for the past almost 2 years, and will go out of his way to pick up someone who wants to attend, even if it means bringing them there straight from jail. He remarried last month, and he has a beautiful wife and stepson. And he has a good job, for which he had to produce a clean UA in order to be hired. I still held my breath, but he was good. He has since been twice promoted, and I can say that he's truly happy and fulfilled, and most important, he's clean. It's still one day at a time, but in December, he will be 2 years clean and sober. I don't know why some addicts live and some die. I feel almost guilty and humbled to be in the presence of someone who's lost a child to this ugly disease. But if nothing else, I'm here to give hope to families that are dealing with the addiction of a loved one. Loving your child isn't always enough. He or she will hurt themselves, They'll harm themselves and cause themselves more pain than you can imagine, and all the love for you, for the love you have for them, can't prevent it and can't stop it. They may lose friendships and relationships with other family members and with you and alienate everybody. They may lose everything they have and cause irreparable havoc from their drug use. You will still love them, even when they are at their worst. I urge friends and families to always let the addict know that you believe they have the ability to recover. There's always hope. In your child's darkest hour, they may find what they need. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cleo Harris. I'm with Snohomish County Human Services Behavioral Health. I'm the county treatment specialist. I've been in the chemical dependency field since 2004, where I was a counselor until about 4 years ago, and I became the county treatment specialist. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about addiction. First, I want to talk to you about that one perfect thing. A lot of times people don't understand and have asked me, why do they keep using when they're so miserable? Why do they keep going out and getting more? So that one perfect thing, that one perfect high, that very first perfect high. So I want you to think about pizza for a minute. Okay, think about your perfect slice of pizza. The one that you want to have again. And you've tried other pizzas from other chains or homemade or a variety of different, right? And you never find quite that same perfect one. You always compare it when you're talking with your family and friends, right? This is really good, but do you remember that one? That's a lot to do with addiction. Somebody can get clean, and then they remember that one perfect high, and they think this time will be just like that one time. Okay? The next thing I want to talk to you about is the if-onlys. If only I had been a better parent. If only they loved me more. If only I loved them more. If I'd been a better wife or husband or girlfriend or boyfriend or friend. If only. Here's the deal, and I'm a little awkward with the microphone, so I apologize. I kind of prefer to pace, but here's the deal with addiction. They love you. The folks who are battling this disease, they love their parents, they love their siblings, they love their husbands, wives, friends, but the addiction has hijacked their brain. And it has made them believe that they need that to survive. So what I ask of you and through this program and when you leave here tonight is when you start thinking the if-onlys, remember it's not about what you did or didn't say or do. It's about that addiction hijacking that brain. We run around, we're wounded when we have somebody with an addiction in our family or in our lives. Because we're beating ourselves up too, saying, if only I could do something better and be better. So some of the things that help, there's self-help and community connectedness. Meetings like this are amazing because they make you realize you're not alone. I mean, look at how many people are in this room tonight, and it's a nasty, wet evening out there. You're not alone. Community connectedness is key. Treatment. It works for some, maybe not for others, but it's oftentimes a start onto the road to recovery. Recovery is a lifelong thing. It's not an end destination. Post-acute withdrawal, something that I want you to understand. When somebody first gets clean, when they first are off the substance, they experience acute withdrawal when they're going off, right? With opiates, which is what we're talking about tonight, it's diarrhea, vomiting, chills, body aches, the flu times 100. I mean, they're sick. And that's acute withdrawal. Post-acute withdrawal happens after that. And that's things like feeling stressed and being clumsy, and they can't remember things. And the crazy thing about post-acute withdrawal is that it causes more stress. And guess what? Stress makes those symptoms worse. And so somebody experiencing this at one point will think using will make this go away and I'll feel sane again. Post-acute withdrawal is huge. So one of the things in treatment that most agencies adhere to is helping folks who are trying to find recovery learn how to reduce stress. You know, exercise, eating right, getting some sleep, talking. All of those things are tools that somebody who doesn't have an addiction uses to help reduce stress, right? Well, with an addiction, they're even more stressed because their coping mechanism is gone. They're using, right? So they no longer can have a drink or a hit or shoot up or smoke a little heroin, or that coping mechanism is gone when they're trying to be in recovery. And that's what they had turned to before. So something to keep in mind. So those are the things that makes it hard to get and stay clean. That's some of it. The addiction, the drug hijacks the brain. They experience withdrawal, and they're sicker than they've ever been. They experience, you know, post-acute withdrawal, and plus the stigma and the fear, and they've lost trust and they're trying to build it again, so there's stress. So that's something that I wanted to impart to you all tonight. So what are the opioids? Okay, so opiates were originally derived from the opium poppy, okay? So the opiates are some derivative of that. But many can be manufactured synthetically, and that's where opioids comes in. That's the more general topic. That's the more general name. So up on the screen are the names of many of the opioids that you've heard of or know about. Most of them are prescription that are up there. Fentanyl is an interesting one because it can be prescription or illicitly made, and we're finding that more and more in our county and in our state. Illegal opioids, heroin and opium. So the legal ones, the prescription ones, become illegal when they're not prescribed to you and they're sold on the street or they're shared or given. What are not opioids? Methamphetamine, cocaine, benzodiazepines such as Valium and Ativan, marijuana, spice, ecstasy, those are not opioids. And I want to differentiate about that because tonight we're talking about opioids, and a lot of people will call all these other substances an opiate. They're not, but they're just as bad for addiction, right? Okay, we are experiencing some of these in our homes and in our families as well, the use of these. So how do people use opioids? For prescription opiates, when they're used as prescribed, the effect is predictable. Okay, so if you go to the doctor, you've had surgery and you're prescribed an opiate, the doctor kind of knows how it's going to react with you, with whatever medications you're on or whatever you're taking, your symptoms, all of that. And you know if you've ever taken one, if you've ever had a medical need for that, you'll take it, you'll get a little drowsy, you'll sleep for a little bit, and about 3.5 to 4 hours later, it wears off, and you start feeling the pain again. The same is true with illegally used opiates. So if I'm using heroin in 3.5 to 4 hours, it's worn off. So I'm looking for more. Okay, but it's predictable when you're taking it. It's when you take it other than as prescribed that the effect is unpredictable. So an example could be, you know, I've taken my pain pill and I forgot I took my pain pill and now I take another one And now I have a synergistic effect, right? It's more than one, it's more than just two. Non-prescription opiates, the effects are variable. You don't know the purity, you don't know what it's cut with, you don't know what it's laced with. Both prescription and non-prescription opiates can be taken by oral ingestion, by smoking, by snorting, or by injecting. It's kind of a little weird. I usually go any questions, and I'm not doing that tonight. So who uses opioids? So a person with a substance use disorder, and that's kind of the focus of this discussion tonight, but a person that's had surgery, a person that has chronic pain, or a person that has other medical or dental issues, all these folks use opiates. And who can overdose on opioids? All of the above. When we look at our opiate overdose death numbers, it includes folks who mistakenly took too much or their liver stopped working. It also includes like family members and friends that use a prescription that isn't theirs. Kids that think medication looks like candy. A person that forgets they've taken their medication, or a person experiencing more pain so they take a little extra. A person that hasn't used an opiate for a few days, so somebody who's been in jail or who has gone through detox or didn't have the money for it or they ran out of the pills, you know, then they have to wait to get their prescription filled at the pharmacy for a few days. It puts them at higher risk for overdose. A person who combines an opiate with another drug like alcohol or a benzodiazepine, because those are also central nervous system depressants. So an example I'd like to give, and I know I have limited time, but I hope you don't give me the signal yet, is if I drink a beer and I have another beer, then I've had 2 beers. But if I drink a beer and I take a pain pill, now I've had the equivalent of maybe 3 beers or 6 beers. Or have the effect of maybe 3 or 4 pain pills. There's a negative impact with that, and people don't always realize that. I've talked to people who have, you know, had pain medication that was prescribed. They were taken exactly as prescribed, but they would have a drink or 2 every night with it. It made them pretty sick. So I want you all aware of that. So how the opioids work. First of all, we have endogenous opioids, which means we have some that are made in our body. Our brains love opiates because we have natural opiate receptors in our brains. Okay, so they're also in the stomach, but for our purposes, I'm just going to talk about the brain tonight. Okay, so here's the deal. If you hurt yourself, if you slam your hand in the car door, it's going to hurt really bad for a second or 2, and then it's going to kind of stop for a few minutes. Or it will be more like a throbbing. It won't be that excruciating pain that just happened when you slammed it, right? Okay, that's because your body has created an enzyme and filled those opiate receptors in the brain. Those opiate receptors cut off the pain signal. So we naturally make these in our body. Opiates also, you know, there's pain relief. It reduces the pain signals. It can give an effect of euphoria, makes you feel really good in the brain regions that are associated with a reward. It's because it stops all pain, physical and emotional. Some people find that opioids at lower doses give them some energy, and higher doses it's sedating. In part because they're not feeling pain, they can move around a little freer, they're not hurting. Opioids cause constipation. It causes respiratory depression and respiratory arrest at a high dose. Alcohol and benzodiazepines enhance that respiratory depression. Tolerance and dependence develop, and withdrawal. So I want to talk to you for a minute about tolerance. So my job here tonight is kind of to help you understand addiction a little bit, okay? So tolerance. I'm going to go back to that 1 beer. If in high school you drank that 1 beer and you got pretty buzzed, but now after high school you could drink 2 or 3 before you feel that buzz, that's tolerance. Our body kind of becomes used to having a substance in it. Okay? dependence, and I'm talking about physical dependence upon a substance. So I'm going to give you the example of I take blood pressure medicine. And if I'm off that blood pressure medicine for 2 or 3 days, you're going to see me start experiencing withdrawal. Now, the withdrawal from blood pressure medicine is like some bloating. I might be a little uncomfortable, probably a little irritable, in part because of the bloating, right? Okay, so my body has become dependent upon that substance to function. My blood pressure will have risen. Okay, so I'm physically dependent upon it. I'm not psychologically dependent upon it because I'm not down at the corner hitting you up for an extra dose. Okay, so where addiction comes in on this, you could be being prescribed an opiate medication from a doctor, and you can be taking it exactly as the doctor has told you. And if you take it for over a week or so, you're going to start developing a little bit of tolerance, and your body may become a little bit dependent upon it. When you go off that medication, so your surgery you've healed, or your broken leg or arm is healed, and you go off of that, you're going to experience mild withdrawal. Most of you will attribute to that as being, well, I've been cooped up in the house, I've been laying around, I don't feel very good, I haven't eaten very good, I have a headache. We won't attribute it to withdrawal because it's mild. You'll experience a little bit of diarrhea, you're not going to feel very good. Okay? We're still at the dependence. Now, when I start the psychological, so I'm taking the pain pills exactly as prescribed to me by my doctor for my condition, but you know what? The in-laws are coming over for dinner tonight. Y'all haven't met my in-laws. So I'm going to pop another pill because I really don't want to deal with them too much tonight, right? That's going to chill me out. I just moved into abuse of the substance. Right there, that's crossing a line. And when I start using it often enough like that, then my brain's going to think it needs it. My body's going to think it needs it. I'm going to start using it to cope with other things than just my broken leg or my surgery. Now I've moved into addiction. And it may be at the lower end of the spectrum, it may be the mild addiction, but before long, it could definitely become a severe case. So how do opioids affect breathing? So these little corkscrew things in this head right here, they kind of look like those wall anchors. Those are supposed to represent the opiate receptors in your brain. And this little red ball up here is an opioid. And what happens is when all of those receptors are full, then it's cut off all pain, right? But it also, because it's a depressant, it's telling the body it doesn't need to breathe. That's what causes overdose. Those receptors get full. So the cool thing and crazy thing, and scientifically cool, I guess, is what happens is while you are developing tolerance, more receptors are put in the brain. More receptors are built into the brain. So you can use a little bit more. But when you use more than what's in those what there's receptors for, then they get filled and you stop breathing. So signs of a possible opioid overdose. Blue skin, tinged lips, fingertips, the body's very limp, the face is very pale, the pulse, the heartbeat are slow, erratic, or not even there at all. Throwing up, oftentimes right before a pass out. Choking sounds or a gurgling, snoring noise, which is in the back of the throat. It's often called the death rattle. And I'm going to try and do it, but I got a microphone, so it's going to be weird. But it's kind of like, that's the body trying to get some oxygen, okay? Breathing is very slow, irregular, or has stopped, and a person's unable to respond. So those are signs of a possible opioid overdose. So one of the things that we've been working on is an opioid project. We have been providing naloxone training and naloxone or Narcan to law enforcement and other community partners. So all of the police departments in Snohomish County and the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, all of those departments are taking part in this, and almost all of their officers have been trained and have Narcan available. We're doing public awareness campaigns. We've been working with the health district. We've been doing public trainings on the Narcan and naloxone. That's huge. The other thing is connecting people to services. So we actually have somebody in our office who goes out when somebody has been administered naloxone, and if they're willing, because that's one thing that has to happen for treatment, right? If they're willing to talk with our opiate outreach specialist, she'll help them get connected to services. So on this slide, it says 107 opioid reversals thus far with the Narcan project with our law enforcement. So I gave this slide presentation to Barbara yesterday. We have 114 overdose reversals as of today. And over 1,500 law enforcement and community partners have been trained to administer naloxone. And we've done additional trainings that we haven't included in this number. So one of the things that you can do if you have someone you love or care about that is using an opiate, whether it's a prescription opiate and maybe it's after a surgery, but they have other medical conditions or they're at high risk for overdose, you can actually get naloxone or Narcan. What you need to do for that, and out in the lobby, I have some sheets of paper with where you can get it, but you can go to many pharmacies in our county and you can tell the pharmacist that you would like Narcan or naloxone. They'll ask you if you would like them to check your insurance, because most insurances cover it. Medicaid does cover it. And then what'll happen is they'll do a brief training with you so that you know how to administer it, and for an agreed upon price, whether it's your copay or your insurance pays for it or you're paying for it out of pocket, you can walk out with that device. Here's the thing with Narcan, and I'm going to tell you right now, I have no conflict of interest. I don't get paid for touting about Narcan, but it's a lifesaver. And I would rather have that like a fire extinguisher in my house and not need it than to not have it and need it. So I encourage anybody who's concerned about one of their loved ones or friends overdosing to have that on hand. So these are the different kinds of Narcan that you can use. There's injectable. The intranasal naloxone, the one in the far corner, that's the old style where it had a nasal atomizer, it had to be put together. The new style, the one that law enforcement is now carrying, is the one on the other side that looks like a little Space Invader thing. And so that you don't have to put that together, you just stick it in the nose and spray. And then there's one that, the Evzio, I guess. Anyway, that's an auto injector that will talk you through the process. So those are the 4 different available types of Narcan or naloxone. So what can you do? So before I go into the what can you do, I want to tell you really quick about treatment. I know I'm running close. Thanks. I want to tell you about treatment. So in our county, there's public and private agencies, and my department and the county Human Services contract with agencies who do Medicaid. They can take regular insurance, but they also do low income. They can also provide services to folks who have insurance, but they can't afford the premiums or the copays, or they just can't afford it. Some of the insurances have a pretty high deductible, that type of thing. So there's also a list out on one of the tables of the agencies that can help folks who just can't afford treatment to get treatment. On the bottom of that page is my name and number, and if somebody wants to call me, I will help them figure out where to go and who to talk to in order to get help. Okay? Treatment works for many people. Does a person need to want it? Yes. But sometimes there's some leverage, okay? Like Linda was talking about, maybe not enabling somebody by giving them money or having access to your jewelry, right? I mean, there's ways to help people by encouraging them to go to treatment. So just want to put that out there. So what can you do? Learn about the problem, which is part of why you're here tonight, right? This is a community problem. You're not alone. We used to hide this, We used to not talk about addiction in our families. Growing up, I kept it a secret, what was going on in my family. Many families don't want to talk about it. There's shame and stigma. Properly dispose of unused medications. This is huge because you know what? The medicine cabinet has now become one of the first drug dealers. Overdose knowledge and recognition. Call 911, rescue breathing, chest compressions, Narcan and naloxone. And that's another training that we'll be talking about with Barbara, I'm sure. Reducing the stigma, increasing awareness. Being aware of you and your family's medications. So if my kids go hang out, at the grandparents for a little while, I'm going to talk to them about the medications that are out in their cabinets. I want it put away. I don't want my kids to have access to it. Do I hope they make the right choice? Yeah. Given what I do, I really hope they make the right choice, but you know what? They might not. Quality substance use treatment. If there's any chance for you to advocate for treatment, please do. Get a hold of your representatives and let them know that treatment's important to you and to your community. Building community and a sense of connectedness. This is huge. To have this many people, this is huge. There's a connection between all of you. Knowing you're not alone can sometimes make a huge difference. Support recovery. I don't ask you to support somebody's addiction, but I do ask you to support their recovery. If somebody's making an honest effort to make a change, to get help, encourage that, support that. It's hard. They're going to have to earn back trust. I get that. But it's really important that they feel they're supported in recovery. And volunteer in your community. We can't make it through this life alone, not easily. So we're going to save the question part for later. I really appreciate all of you being here. I don't know what brought you here tonight or who's affecting your life that made you want to come and learn more. If there's anything I can do or our department can do at the county, please let us know. We have resources. We can help find that path. Sometimes it just takes talking to someone and letting them know somebody really cares for them to say, you know what, I'll try it. Thanks.
While we're switching around with speakers, I just want to remind everybody you were given cards. So if you have a question and you want to put that on the card so that we can answer those questions in the Q&A, you can also just put your hand up when we're doing Q&A, but just as a reminder.
Good evening. Boy, it's such a great turnout on this rainy night. I really appreciate you coming out to hear this important topic. And my name's Carol Cummings. I'm the police chief for the city of Bothell, and I am here to give you the law enforcement perspective. In the 1990s, as many of you might recall, there was a bit of a peak of heroin use. It made some of the news. I think that's where the term heroin chic came in. And then it died down for a period of time. A few years ago, probably about 5 years ago, the criminal justice system and law enforcement noticed an explosion of opioid use. And we were amazed. There was a lot of conversation about this. Why aren't people talking about this? It's huge. It's impacting our communities, but it was really silent in the media for a long time. And finally, I don't know, about a year or two ago, you started hearing more information about it, and the public became more interested in it. Media was talking about it a little bit more. And I appreciate a lot of what Cleo was saying, because we tend to use the term heroin to cover everything. And it's really a lot more complicated than that. We have heroin, we have pharmaceuticals, and we also have a lot of other drugs that are being used either separately, but more and more in combination. Again, when I first started this job a long time ago, we'd have people that used meth, or they used crack, or they used heroin. You know, they had their drug of choice. And what we've been seeing now in this current cycle is a lot of people using multiple drugs. A big one, heroin, is oftentimes being seen now with methamphetamine. In fact, the King County Medical Examiner said in the last 7 years, there's been a 5-fold increase in meth overdoses. And we see that, again, I think the goofball with the meth and heroin, you know, is a stimulant and a depressant. So the other thing that I've seen different in this crisis, and it really is a crisis, is how visible it has become. It used to be you didn't really see it unless you were in certain areas, and now you're seeing it everywhere. You see people, you know, on the street. You see people slumped over in their cars. You see people shooting up next to buildings. And I was just having a conversation with our prosecutor, Rhonda Geiger, about, you know, why is that? And I can really only speculate. Part of me thinks, well, you know, you used to be able to get a cheap little apartment or a cheap hotel, and you can't get that anywhere. I don't know if it's because there's so many people now, or, as we heard, families are realizing they've got to do something, and they're telling their loved one they have to leave. But that's much more visible than it used to be. So the law enforcement perspective on this is complicated and it's evolving, and I want to put it in some context tonight. This disease is hitting everybody. It's hitting children. It's hitting older people. It's hitting poor people, rich people, all socioeconomic groups, all age groups. There are people who are unemployed. There are people who have really high-paying jobs. Many had their path to addiction start when they had an injury, and then they got hooked on the pills the doctors were giving them, and then they didn't get those pills anymore, and they moved to heroin. I mean, there's many different stories. But while there's a sizable number of people who are struggling with addiction that have a source to find their drugs, I'm not talking about them tonight. I'm primarily talking to the people that are addicted and do not have a source of way to finance their drugs, and so they're committing crimes. I've had many people describe to me how horrible it is to withdraw from an opioid. And I think we heard tonight from Cleo some of the symptoms. When you are feeling so sick, and what I've been told, when you feel you will do anything to make that stop. And in the case, if you don't have the money for it, you'll commit a crime. You'll steal, you'll sell your body, you'll do whatever you need to do. So at law enforcement, we see the ravages to the person that's addicted, but we're also seeing the effect that illegal use is having on the residents in our community. There's a very strong connection between drug addiction and the level of property crime in Bothell. And what I mean by property crime, I'm talking car prowls, burglaries, identity theft, mail theft, package theft, organized retail theft. The rise of all the websites that you can sell property on have made it a lot easier for people to fence, and so that probably is helping spur that on. What I'm going to show you, a quick graph. It's not the number of crimes that we've had in the city for these particular incidents. It's how many hours our officers have spent on it. Those are two very different things. So you'll see kind of car prowls down toward the end because they're very quick to go and investigate. But the thefts that we're going to are so complicated now to investigate. They're taking much more time. So the theft right here, VUXA, which is felony drugs such as heroin, top 2 by a long shot for how many hours we're spending on the investigation of these crimes. So when I talk to, let's see, let me throw this one more. And here's another one I thought was very interesting. When you want to see about the spike of drug use, so remember 2012, it was illegal to have marijuana. Then we decided that you can have marijuana, So we stopped enforcing that law. So there you go. 2012, marijuana is illegal, and you can see that. It drops way down, right? And then, boom, that's the increase. We haven't had an increase in officers. That's the increase in felony drug use and paraphernalia, because sometimes we'll arrest people that they've just smoked their drugs and they've got the paraphernalia and there's a residue. So when I spoke to my officers, I went down and did an informal poll, and I asked them, tell me what's the incident rate of the people that you're arresting that have a problem with drugs, that are addicted. Every officer that I spoke to gave this percentage. It was really unusual. 80 to 90% of the people that they are arresting for property crimes are addicted to drugs. Now, we don't have that. I don't have, I haven't gone down and checked every single case report, but the fact that every officer told me that, I thought was really interesting. So then I was talking to some people in the courts and a probation officer and asked them the same question. And they said, let's see, we've got 10% of people that use alcohol and get in trouble. We've got 10% that get really angry and hit people. And then we've got probably 80% that use drugs and get arrested. So it's really a remarkable problem that we have. One officer told me he's actually gotten to the point that when he arrests somebody for a property crime that is not addicted to drugs, he's surprised, and it kind of registers to him. So, and we also need to I need to recognize that this is not just a law enforcement issue. This is a prosecutor's issue. This is a court issue. This is a jail issue. This is a probation issue. This is for the labs and the hospitals and the social services and CPS. It's huge, and it's impacting our entire community and our pocketbook too, because they all take resources. It also takes the time it takes to investigate these crimes. It's a lot more complicated. And let me give you just, I've got, if you want, I'll tell you a little story about one average call. I was talking to an officer and said, tell me about a recent call you had. And he said, okay, I get called to a DUI, driving under the influence. And driving under the influence can be alcohol or it can be drugs. And the guy is slumped over. It's clear that he is probably high. They end up getting him out of the car. We have to take him back. We have to go write up a search warrant. We have to get the search warrant approved by a judge to do a drug draw. We have to get him to somebody that will do the drug draw. We also have to do a search warrant, get it signed, to go back and then tow the car and go into the car where, in this case, they found drug paraphernalia and drugs and a whole bunch of stolen property, credit cards. I think in this case it was credit cards, and it might have been stolen, and mail. It's not just from Bothell, it's from all over the region. So now you have to make a connection and try to figure out how to get the property back. What 10 years ago was a couple hours, a DUI, this was days. And this is an average kind of call, which is why that first slide that I showed you shows how much time we're taking. And you can understand probably the frustrations the officers have, this repeat. My mother used to say, pouring sand down a rat hole. You just feel like you're never getting to the end. And the other risk to the public, it's not just the crime, it's the needles that get tossed. And you go to a park and you're scared your child's going to see a needle. It's driving issues. It's the risk to families, to children, child neglect. Another example of a recent call, we had a traffic officer that was looking for another violation and sees a woman that nodded off in front of on a traffic stop. It's traffic light. And so he turns around, he tries to get around, and she comes to enough and drives on. He pulls in behind her at the next traffic light, and she nods off again. So he manages to get her over to the side of the road, approaches the car, and she's got a toddler in the car. She had shot up and was taking her child to daycare. putting herself, putting the child, and putting whoever else is on the road at risk. And then again, drug, search warrant, tow the car, get a hold of CPS, all as to aside from the tragedy of that family. So, boy, I feel like I'm a Debbie Downer here, but anyway, hang with me. There's a little bit of a light at the end. The impact, there's got the impact on the person that has the addiction, and you have the impact on the community. But I also want you to hear about the impact on the officers and the rest of the criminal justice system, because there is one. Officers are really at risk now for needles. They search people, they have to search cars, they have to search homes, and a needle stick is a serious issue. And you even if you get a needle stick and the person's willing to get tested, you don't know if that's the person that used that needle. And there are a lot of serious diseases that can come from that. Aside from the close contact with some of the people that are really living in a challenging situation and they're much more at risk for a lot of communicable diseases, and the officers are in close contact with that. And we heard a little bit about fentanyl, and I want to just take a tiny moment to discuss fentanyl because this is a game changer. Fentanyl has hit Canada and it's hit the East Coast like gangbusters, and they have it's very, very dangerous for people that use it. They have had mass overdoses where they get a bad case of fentanyl, because it's, well, actually, let me just show this. I think I've got fentanyl. The amount of fentanyl for a lethal overdose compared to heroin is remarkable. So the vial on the left is heroin. I don't know if you can, it's kind of hard to see, but see the powder there? That's a lethal dose of heroin. That's a lethal dose of fentanyl. So for people that are getting fentanyl, it's causing, well, I'll show you two quick slides. This is nationally, the rate of overdoses is all drug overdoses involving opioids here, and this is all drug, this would be meth and some of the other drugs. So now I want you to see what with fentanyl, Canada has really, was that? Yeah, let's see, I think so it's about 2 inches, and that's, so 1.5 inches with the glass right there. So let me get this. So this will be my last slide. So with the British Columbia, which has really been hit hard with fentanyl, for 2016, the dotted line are illicit drug deaths excluding fentanyl. The solid line are illicit drug deaths including fentanyl. So when you see that, you see how lethal this is. And it's very concerning. We've had conversations in law enforcement and with some of the public health with how do we get real-time information on overdoses so that we can put the word out, so that we can be, let the community know that there's a dangerous type of drug out there. We're still working on that. We've got the DEA has some ideas. But for purposes of the danger to officers is that they're going into these situations and it takes very little to inhale fentanyl and be seriously impacted by it. We've had just 2 cases recently, right in this area, in Bothell a case and in Woodinville a case where they got the drug labs back and there was fentanyl in it. So it's not here yet, and I'm probably getting into too much detail, but for some reason they're not mixing it with black tar, and we tend to have a lot of black tar heroin in this area. But as the medical examiner says, he thinks it's just a matter of time. So there's, and I am in no way an expert, but a lot of times with fentanyl, they'll put in a pill form. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of it up in British Columbia, because that's where a lot of the pill manufacturing is going on for a variety of reasons. But what's been concerning is that, and so pills are fairly stable. You know, you could cut it. It's still dangerous. But what's been concerning is recently, and I know probably Cleo knows more about this than I do, but they've been getting packages of pure fentanyl that is powdered substance. And so then, you know, if you're not aware that it's fentanyl, you're in trouble because you can inhale it. You know, just those tiny little bit of grains can be problematic. So the other thing I want to talk about for, you know, in regards to the impact of law enforcement is the emotional toll. And it's, again, it's not just law enforcement, it's our prosecutors' offices, and it's our courts, and it's the CPS that are going out to the homes. But seeing the same people and seeing the overdoses and seeing the pain in the families and not knowing, you know, having your the people in your community being victimized and having their property stolen or their ID and trying to deal with that and making the same arrest for the same people, and just that cycle can be exhausting and really draining. So we're all in this world together, and we're all humans, and there's that negative impact. So we have done some things. And some of it is law enforcement focused, that we've worked to develop what we call SODA districts, stay out of drug area. This is a tool that the courts, if you have committed a crime that's involving drugs, the court can say, you may not be in this area, which are prevalent for drug use. And that gives law enforcement a tool, so we don't have to wait. If we see somebody that we know has been, say, dealing drugs, we don't have to stand back and wait until we actually see the hand-to-hand. If they are in that area, we can go and contact them, and and immediately remove them from that area, and it's a violation. That's a law enforcement aspect to it. But we are also doing other things, because if there's one thing I can tell you, we cannot arrest our way out of this. It will not work. Our prosecutor and our courts are working on this. They're doing things, as has been acknowledged, you have to be ready for treatment to have it work. But they are willing in many, many cases, if somebody is willing to go to treatment, to trade day to day instead of jail, a day in treatment. I mean, that's one aspect of it. You know, our police officers, they're not mental health workers. They're not counselors. That's not their training, but we're learning. We're learning how to maybe look with a broader brush on how to help individuals, instead of just say, you know, there's arrest and there's not arrest. And we realize now there's got to be more to it. So we have naloxone, Narcan, so everybody has that. It also is a safety measure for our officers should they be exposed unintentionally. We have a methadone clinic in Bothell. We have cards for our officers if they see somebody in a car, you know, out on the street. Homelessness, mental health, drug addiction, a lot of times they're intertwined. And so it's a reference card with numbers that people can call that either right then or when they're ready, because again, you have to be in that point that you're ready. But at least they'll have it. Maybe they'll put it in their pocket when they're really reaching that stage. They'll know where to go. And then one of the most exciting things that have happened recently is that we were able to work in collaboration with Shoreline to get what we call our navigator. And so the navigator is a mental health professional who we can refer people to when we go out and there is, say, somebody struggling with homelessness or mental health or addiction. And she runs a caseload, and she can go contact them and see if she can get them into service. But the most exciting part about this process is that when she is at Bothell, she will frequently ride with officers, so that when they get a call where somebody is in crisis, whether it's a mental health crisis or we had somebody who's suicidal because they just can't stand their addiction anymore and they don't know what to do, the time to get them help is right then, to say, okay, I'll work with you, I'll get you into treatment, rather than, you know, I'll give you a number and in 2 weeks we'll have somebody contact you. So that has been really, really powerful. Unfortunately, right now we only have her for a small amount of time each week, but we can already see a huge difference. And then as far as I wanted to close with what you can do, because I think that's important, and much of what I had was also mentioned by Cleo, and a lot of it has to do with understand the dangers of prescriptions. I mean, if you don't think you're going to use your prescription if you've had surgery, don't fill it. Or talk to your doctor and say, I know you gave me a prescription for 10 days. How about we have it for 2? And if I need more, I'll call you. Safely store your medication. I have 3 kids. I trust, but I verify. And I do not leave any of my medication in my medicine chest. Even if it's not for my kids, if somebody's going to burglarize my house, they're going to go right to the medicine chest. So don't do it. You know, put it in a safe place out of sight. And get rid of your old medication, may I underline, and not by flushing it, because that's just really doing terrible things. So it's so easy. I mean, this is another good thing. I actually did it, because here I am. I'm saying get rid of your old medication. I go home, and it's like, oh, God, there it is. Haven't done it. Put it in a bag, walk over to the police department. It takes as long as it takes to say, I have some medication I want to turn in, and you drop it in the box. That's how fast it is. You don't have to go just to the police department. There are drop-off locations throughout this area. I actually Xerox the list that's there at a handout right outside. If you forget, all you have to do is go to bothellwa.gov, your city website, and type in medicine take back, and it'll give you all the information as far as the different locations. Super easy, and it makes you feel good. So, and then with children, you know, talk to them. And talk to them earlier than you think you need to. Talk to them when they're in grade school. And be open about what addiction is. Keep them involved, keep them in sports, you know, keep them close, have dinner, but talk to them. And talk to their friends and know their friends. There is no guarantee I can give you, because it's way too complicated than that. And then also, if there was a guarantee, everybody would be doing it. But keeping that line of communication open, and if you suspect something, ask, research. Don't say it couldn't happen to me, because it can. And finally, get involved. There are things you can do. North Shore School District is a superintendent here. Oh, Superintendent Reed is here. So we have a really innovative school district in Bothell, the North Shore School District. And Superintendent Reed is going to be developing a task force on how we look at Well Child. I think called a Well Child Task Force. And one of the components is, what do we do if we have a child that's struggling with addiction? You know, how do we handle that? I mean, old school, hey, kick them out, right? We have to be more compassionate than that. What do we do if we have a child whose parent is struggling with addiction? How do we support them? And that's just one component of it, because there's many other aspects to Well Child. But we need you to get involved, because they're your children. You know, so how do we want to handle this as a community? So with that, I think that is. I think that pretty much covers it because I know I'm kind of seeing it's getting to be that time. So I'll let you go, and I know there'll be time for question and answers at the end. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ben. Yeah, so sorry, I was waiting for the introduction, but my bad. So that's what that pause was. Anyways, so yeah, I grew up in Bellevue in Kirkland, so not too far from here, over on the east side, and my house was, my mom and my dad were pretty normal, kind of like what you were saying down there. They were good, and I grew up not really wanting a whole lot of, I pretty much had everything I wanted. I have a twin sister who, her and I were really close. And what I want to say that is like, my family looked really good on the outside, right? But there was a lot of like neglect and kind of like emotional abuse. I'm not saying my parents were bad people. They did the best with what they had. But they were always like really busy, and they didn't really have a whole lot of time for us. So we're just our own little unit, my sister and I. And when I was really little, I started reading at a really young age, like a really high level. And I got really into fantasy books. And this is relevant because everyone thought it was really cool that I could read really well when I was so young. And really what it was like I was looking for a way to escape, right? Like I wanted to escape reality. It was a way because like all the characters in these fantasy books were like super strong, and they could do whatever they wanted, had like magical powers, and I felt pretty helpless when I was a kid, and I didn't really have a whole lot of power to control how I felt or how people. I couldn't like control people, and that's was a thing that I struggled with a lot. I just felt alone a lot when I was a kid, besides me and my sister. I mean, we had family outings and stuff, but yeah, my parents weren't there a whole lot when I was a kid, is what I'm trying to say. Not their fault, they were really busy with work or whatever, but it was a struggle for my sister and I. Also, when I was 4 years old, I was kind of a rowdy kid, I was a little boy. And my parents put me on what was it? It was called Dexedrine, which was an ADHD medication. And I guess that was like really close to meth, It was like really similar to it, and like the chemistry. And it taught me from a very early age that I was a problem and that medication could solve it, or an outside substance could fix that problem, I was always getting in trouble in school. I would talk all the time and not listen and argue, and I was really hard-headed, and I still to this day, like I had a really, really hard time with authority when I was a kid. Like I was okay if I was getting the things that I wanted, and I was really good at like manipulating people from a really young age, like being polite and having manners and stuff. But if I started getting disciplined, then it turned around really quick, and I could get really mouthy, really aggressive, and really mean. And I was in trouble a lot, I'll put it that way. Vivid memories of being in big trouble. So moving forward, through trying to escape through books and, taking prescription medications from a young age, and just like the rest of the average childhood stuff. Moving on to like middle school. So I was in Catholic school when I was a little kid. And then my parents switched me to public school, and they had gotten a divorce by this time. And yeah, they had like a really bad divorce too. It was really bad. It was pretty traumatic for my sister and I. And anyway, so they divorced, and we went to a public middle school. We went to Chinook in Bellevue, back when it was a lot smaller than it is now. And it was like a whole new thing, it was a whole different environment, because like before we were raised, we went to church all the time, and we would have church in school, and then it was like this whole environment of like people that hadn't ever been around the stuff that we had grown up with, so we had to kind of adapt and change. And I remember like it was around 7th grade, there were some kids that were smoking weed, smoking marijuana, and I decided to join in, and I did it. And I just remember like the first time that I ever did drugs, I loved it, you know. It was better than books. It was better than, you know, sports or TV or anything. It made me feel okay with myself. And it was like the first time in a long time that I really felt like I was like a part of a group, and that people like kind of cared about me, and that I didn't have like all this anxiety and worry going on. A big part of it was like, a big part of this disease for me is anxiety, you know, like when I wasn't using, I would have tons of anxiety all the time. I'd constantly be worried about stuff. And when I used, I did not have that. And it also kind of gave me this whole group of people that we kind of had this common, like we shared this common thing, you know, like we were like a group, and it was the first time that I'd ever really like had like a group of friends that I could like hang out with all the time. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. It was just like bonds of camaraderie. I don't really know how to explain it. It's, you know, just think about like your best group of friends that you have, and that's pretty much what it was, you know. That was the first time that I really had that. And, but what stinks about it is that it moves from, you know, just kind of like going out and, you know, throwing water balloons and egging buses and stuff like that. And then it kind of grows from there. You know, it's like, I've never really been a good person with having enough, you know, like I've never been like, oh, this little bottle of water is enough. I better bring this frickin' 5-gallon one, you know. I've always had to have more. And so what starts out as like a little bit, it steadily progressed, and towards like when I got into high school, then it was like when all my other friends were, like when all the kids that I went to middle school with, all like the ones that didn't do drugs or party, or the ones that listened to their parents and stuff, they were all doing their homework and playing sports, and I was out like, you know, running the streets and being a delinquent. And then it kind of like turned into more and more drugs. And my parents didn't really know what to do. Most children, when you're like, you can't have, because this was about the time when they had like those brick phones, those Nokia brick phones, you know, you could play Snake on and stuff. They'd be like, you can't have your phone if you don't follow the rules. And I'd be like, I don't care. It was very frustrating for them because there was no punishment that they could give me that I cared about. You know, they're like, you're grounded. I'm like, I'm leaving, you know? And it was really hard for them. They struggled a lot with it. Around this time, my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. Sorry, I'm gonna get into the opioid stuff here in a little bit. I'm trying to give you like a whole kind of feel for what the addiction was like for me. And at that point, you know, she got worse and worse and worse, and I got worse and worse and worse, and I wasn't really there a whole lot. And she ended up passing away. And right at that time when she passed away, someone had an Oxycontin, and this was about 13 or 14 years ago. And it was just a little one, you know, it was like a little yellow one. I think it was like a 20 milligram or something. And we smoked it, and that was the best I'd ever felt in my entire life. Hands down. Up until that point, I'd never been more comfortable. It's the opposite of how I feel right now. Super comfortable, just relaxed. The best thing I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick. I haven't spoken in front of people in a while. So the best way that I explain it to people is that it's like, just imagine like the static on your TV. Like if you have just the static on the old TVs when they were static, you know, and you turn it up really loud, and it's like, you see all the little black and gray and white things, and they're just moving around, and it's super loud and you hate it. And just imagine you just turn your TV off, and it's like quiet and still and silent, and you're like, oh, peace. That's exactly what it felt like for me to do opiate for the first time. And the worst part about opiates, well, one of the worst parts about opiates is that the pills, they get too expensive. You know, the pills are really a lot more expensive than the illicit street drugs. Well, they're all illicit, I guess, but so you start, at least for me, I started out with Oxycontin, and it pretty much immediately, not very long after Oxycontin, it moved straight into heroin, you know, and and it was really easy to get, and everyone had it. And this was 13, 12, 13 years ago. And just looking at my friends and stuff and all the pills that we were doing, pills were exploding at that point. Like, no one had really had them up, and I mean, it wasn't really a thing, but it seemed like right around that time it got huge, you know. And another interesting fact is that all the people from Bellevue that sold them, we would have to come up here to get them. We'd have to come to Bothell or Linwood or Everett to get large quantities of them from the distributors, you know. This was when we were younger. And it just seemed like this is where they all was up here in the north end. So that's just another interesting fact right there. And yeah, so for me, it pretty much quickly, because like, I mean, you could spend thousands of dollars on OxyContin in a day, you know, thousands of them, and you get the same amount as you would get for like $100 with the heroin, you know. So that's where the jump comes from, you know, at least on the street. Anyway, so I had I never really had any run-ins with the law. I was very fortunate. I have a lot of friends who have, and it's very strenuous and a long and arduous process, even after you get clean. But for me, I had a lot of health issues. I would go into like psychoses. I was mixing them. And I remember like the worst thing that ever happened, one of the reasons that I got clean was I had like done too much, and I was living at my dad's house in his basement because he had never gone to like a family week and learned about enabling, you know? And so he was like, oh yeah, you can live in my basement and stay here and eat food. And for him, it was like a harm reduction thing. Like, well, if he's here using, at least he's not out on the street using, you know? And so I was down there, and I blacked out, and I woke up, and I was just like covered in blood, and I was at the hospital, you know. And he had to like break the door down, and I guess I was like going insane. And I put him through a huge amount of horror and misery that night. Like, I had to get like all my hands stitched up, you know. I was just covered in stitches, and my dad found me like that. But I was still, I was still moving. Apparently, I was like screaming, and I was like, I don't know. It was just really traumatic for him. I don't remember it, thank God. But yeah, we don't really talk about it much. We have a few times. He said it was one of the worst things that he's ever witnessed in his life. So I did that, and then I had a couple of times where I had to go to the hospital for abscesses, which are it's basically a staph infection, you know, that you can get, and it's really, really painful. And yeah, and at this point, like, there was a counselor at the hospital for the last time that I had the abscess who said that, oh, you know, because I was telling them they were spider bites, you know, and they were like, you're not fooling anybody. And she was really mean, this like nurse or whatever, and they brought in this, what are they called? Someone who did an assessment, a drug assessment on me, and I was kind of willing to do one because I was really tired of being sick. Like, I was getting, like, when she was talking about sick, like, like the flu times 100, you know, it's coming out of both sides. You know, but the anxiety that comes with it, I don't know, it's like the worst anxiety that you've ever felt in your life. Just like it's the best way I can describe it is a sense of impending doom at all times, and like coupled with like this horrible flu. So, and like what she was saying, that what the police chief was saying is that it's like having the flu, but you know exactly what'll cure the flu. You know, it'd be like if you had the flu and you went to the store and they were like, oh, we're selling these flu pills, and if you take it, you won't feel sick anymore at all. That's exactly what opiates do. If you're sick and having a withdrawal, the second you take one, you feel fine again. So anyway, I did the assessment, I went to treatment, and this was the first treatment. And I got out, I relapsed. I learned all about my brain and how it works and where my addiction comes from. I got out and then I relapsed. I was living at a clean and sober house. I relapsed. I went right back into treatment again. This one was a lot more, this was at the Salvation Army. It was a lot harder of a one. They make you work 40 hours a week plus for your room and board. It's free, except for your work, you know. And I stayed clean for 5 years out of that one. And in that time I had met a girl and we had a baby, and, you know, I was in 12-step recovery and I was doing really good. But I decided that I could drink again. And so I started drinking, and like a couple months later, I was doing opiates again. And I'm trying to think where, and now this time I've been clean for 4.5 years. And yeah, so I mean, doing pretty good. I mean, I was pretty fortunate where I was able to kind of stop it at a young age. You know, I didn't have to like live under the bridges and, you know, go to prison for years and years, and I didn't have to do all those yets that there are. But I've definitely harmed a lot of people in my life, my family being the most. The closest people that there were to me were the ones that I harmed the most. And, you know, like what she was saying, he stole all her jewelry. I've done that. I stole all my dad's stuff, stole a lot of my sister's stuff. And yeah, I've done a lot of things that I'm not proud of, but what's cool about being in recovery is that is that we get a chance to make amends to people that are willing to have us make amends to them farther on down in the process. And this time being in recovery, like, you know, I've been in Narcotics Anonymous for 4.5 years, and I've been really plugged in, and I've got a good group of people that are around me, and I have, one of my things is I have like 5 people that I can call at any time of the day if I'm having an issue. It was a really big issue when I had like 5 days clean. You know, I was on my phone all the time. But now it's not so much, you know. Every once in a while, if I'm like mad because she made me do the dishes when I didn't want to or something, I'll use it, you know. Or she wouldn't let me go fishing, you know. But no, I mean, life is good now, you know. Like, I have a career, I bought a house, bought a car, like I have a family. The boy, his mom and I are all still together, you know. We have a dog, we have chickens, you know. It's like, you know, the perfect lot, you know. I couldn't ask for anything better, you know. And really, like, it comes from the willingness to be clean and the desire to stay clean. And most of it, all that stuff, and like this, like now all my friends are in Narcotics Anonymous, you know. Like I hang out with people in NA every time that I can, you know. I don't know. I do a lot of service work in NA. It's super rewarding. It's like a way to give back for all the harm that you've done, you know. And you know, I almost cried during Linda's story because I remember doing that exact same stuff to my family members, and it just made me sad, you know. So, yeah, if you guys have any questions about Narcotics Anonymous or any sort of resources to get clean or stay clean, we have pamphlets and stuff out there too, and we're more than willing. If you guys have family members that you're wondering about, if you can help them or whatever, just come talk to us, you know, because you can get clean and stay clean for the rest of your life. You know, there's people in Narcotics Anonymous that we know that, you know, 30 years clean, you know, 20 plus years clean, and it's easily, well, not easily all the time, but it's doable, you know. But it is a complete way of life. It's not like, oh, well, I can have a drink every once in a while, you know. So it's definitely difficult, and it's life-changing, but it's the only way to have an actual life. So, yeah, anyways, do I have some more time, or do you want me to? Okay. Man, I was really nervous there. Oh, thank you. What's that? Oh, thank you.
So I'm Jennifer Phillips. I'm the city manager. I'm here to moderate The first thing that I need to do, I think, for at least for me, but hopefully for the entire audience, is I need to give both of you a hug.
Okay. Awesome. I love hugs. Thank you.
To be able to share your stories with us, I think, is really what brings a forum like this to life. Because for those of us who maybe haven't been touched by something like this or are struggling with something like this, the courage that you're showing, and I think for me especially, the anxiety to do something that makes you anxious and willing to put yourself out there for us, to me was really moving for me. And for you to share, I just really appreciate it. And then the expertise that we had to help us become more knowledgeable is certainly appreciated. So if you're able and willing, and there is Kleenex in the room, by the way, if you do have some questions, I do have some questions on some cards from some folks. But does anybody first have some questions for the panel that you'd like to ask? Yes, sir.
Well, I'm sure it's going to come up anyway. I'd like to know how the panel feels about the proposals to have injection sites.
So I'm happy to take that. I don't know about the panelists, but for the city of Bothell, this city council has determined that it's a topic that they would be interested in potentially discussing in the new year. And so since we're in the city of Bothell, that's our decision, or the city council's decision is to potentially have that discussion in the future. I don't know if from a technical standpoint, if anyone would like to answer, but I can tell you from our perspective, it's not currently a topic that will be discussed. Some other questions? Yes. Wait for the mic just for, if you'll wait just a half a second.
This question, is it on? This question is for Carol. Are you guys considering at all a LEADS program, like a law enforcement assisted diversion program, similar to what
Seattle's
Seattle's having, considering some of your trends?
You know, it's a matter of, that's a really interesting, innovative program. And because for those of you that are not aware, and you may be able to describe it better than myself, but it's putting out both officers and mental health people on the street to contact people who are currently using, and to let them know when you are ready, we will help you. I mean, to try to stay in touch, to give them access. I mean, is that the best way to describe it? Mm-hmm. Right.
Prosecutors that get overloaded, that are having a hard time. When someone is caught with paraphernalia, or they're getting, they're feeling sick, and there's a choice that's put before the person. Would you like to enter this LEADS program? And there's a certain period of time that they have to show up, or am I going to charge you with actual charges right now? So you get a choice put before you. Are you interested in moving in this direction? However, the one interesting caveat about the LEADS program is that immediate sobriety is not, your participation is not based on whether you're able to be immediately sober.
Yeah, that's the part that I was talking about as far as that ongoing outreach, so that it's not a on-off switch. You're either not using drugs and we'll work with you, or you are using drugs and we won't. And so we don't have the capacity or the financial ability to do that. I mean, that is a really, Seattle's a big city. I think it's like almost 700,000 now. So the navigator that we have, that MHP, that's kind of our effort to move in that direction, where there may be times where we actually are even arresting somebody and we are trying to get them service. So we're having the MHP work with them to say, do you need treatment, or, can we get you housing? Can we get you set up with mental health? And so that's kind of our version of it. So.
The Navigator program, is this a salaried or a volunteer program? And it seems like we could use several navigators. And then there are any plans to increase the number of navigators?
So this was from King County, and it's funded through the MID money, which is a 0.1% sales tax for mental health. And so Shoreline Police Department has a DOJ grant to deal with another issue in regards to mental health challenges, and then this came in as part of it. And so we work really closely with Shoreline, and so when we found out what they were doing, and there is overlap because people don't see city boundaries, they were willing to extend the program to Bothell. I absolutely agree with you that it's exciting and it's a game changer in many ways, but it's also fairly new. So when you have something that's fairly new, you have to show a track record, and that's what we're building right now, and I really hope that it catches fire. I have other police chiefs saying, hey, how do we get a little of this? And the other thing is, it's not unique. Everett, for example, have mental health professionals that ride with their officers. Again, they're a bigger city. What we're having to look at is kind of multifaceted. You've got big cities, and there are programs that work well for big cities, and then we have to figure out what works well for mid-size or smaller communities, because they're not the same. And so that's what we're trying to build with this.
I was wondering about the source of what is being done to stop the flow, from the supply.
There's no one easy answer to that. The problem with the recession is a lot of the things that were built up with task forces that were working on that many of them have been cut back. But there are still, like the Snohomish County Drug Task Force is a partner with us. The DEA, of course, looks at things in a broader scope. They've got Medicaid investigators that work on the pharmacy issue, because it's not just heroin coming in from Mexico or from China. It's also, as we heard, pills, and that's been in the newspaper quite a bit. So there's so many different ways that it's coming in. There's an equal number of ways that people are trying to stop it, but it's really complicated. And obviously we're not that successful. I mean, if people want drugs, they're going to find them. And so it's really trying to do that education piece to stop the desire. I mean, or to build up the strength to not get involved. Cleo, do you have, or does anybody else have any other recommendations on that one?
Oh, yeah, there's not like one big mega drug dealer somewhere where you can just like stop him and then stop all the drugs. It's like, yeah, people cook it here, people make it. I mean, you could buy fentanyl up in Granite Falls from this dude at a trailer park. I mean, people are just making the stuff, and people are making meth and growing weed on their own. I mean, it's not, I don't know, it sounds like borderline impossible to stop it, so.
So if I can, I have a question, a good segue. So I have two things. One is a comment. Teach drug classes every year over and over. I think that all schools should regularly teach classes about drug addiction and prevention earlier than they do at my school. We just began learning about this year, and I'm in 8th grade. So from our youth, a really great comment. And then coupled with that is, how does the opioid epidemic look at the middle school level? Let's say 7th grade in the North Shore School District. Is it something that's happening we heard from Ben, he certainly had exposure to it at a younger age. Is it also from your experiences in the middle school?
Well, it's everywhere. Okay, so I was in a military family, so I went to, I think, 4 different middle schools, and you didn't use the bathroom during breaks because of the drug use, and wasn't just popping pills, but they actually had some people that were injecting, and that was a long time ago. So it is there. There's no question you deluding yourself. I think the thing that we have with North Shore is that we have a really dedicated group of educators who keep their eyes open and are not fearful of bringing issues forward. But the other challenge is keeping kids in school that are using. I mean, many times they tend to stop coming to school, and then there's really no resource. But I guess I might ask the superintendent if she has some thoughts on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Was that thoughtful? Anyhow, do you know, I think one of our board members, Director Ken Smith, is on the other side of the room, and we have a clipboard tonight. If you're interested in being on what we're calling our Healthy Child Task Force, we would love to get your name and contact information. Too often we attend meetings where people say, oh, we're interested, and get back to us, and we don't connect. So if you are interested in being on our task force, please sign in and we will connect you. As the chief said, I think we have drugs in schools, not just North Shore, but Bellevue, where the young man went to school, right? We're going to do our best to address that in a healthy way. We know we have families that are affected. I have 2 board members. Our board president, Amy Cast, is also here, and it's a topic we need to take very seriously. We also know its connection to mental health and the anxiety our students have today, which is unprecedented, and at some level also coincides with the explosion of social media and cell phones and those types of things. There are a lot of pressures on young people today. So we're working on the best pathway forward, and I think that involves prevention, treatment, intervention, consequences that are real and thoughtful and empathetic. So if you're interested, Director Smith has the sign-up sheet, and at this point, I think I'll leave it at that. So, yeah.
And there is one thing that we do we try to make it easier for kids to say no. So one of the things we broadcast, we have a drug dog, and we'll do searches in the school. And we do we don't want to sneak in someday and do it. We want students to know that this is going to happen, so that, maybe that will make them a little more fearful about bringing things into school, or give them a reason to not use. I always told my kids, just tell your friends that I drug test you every week. I didn't, but at least give them if I might, but to give them a way out, give them a face-saving way out, so.
We had a question. I saw a hand go up. Yes.
I don't want to throw cold water, and so please know how incredibly grateful I am that the police departments and the schools are doing the programs that they are. I started in the drug and alcohol and mental health field in 1975 in King County, and I retired 4 years ago from the prison in Monroe and covered a whole lot of areas between those two as far as drugs go. And King County has always been kind of a magnet for heroin. In 1980s, I worked at Cedar Hills, a 200-bed facility that used to be open to addiction, with a client who said he came here from New York. He was a heroin addict, because he knew that there was one treatment here and lots of heroin here. So he had one of 2 choices. He either got clean or he could have all the heroin he wanted. So it's what we're seeing now is dramatically new, but it has always been here. For those of you who really want to know how it all happened, read the book Dreamland by Sam Quinones. It'll give you a massive history of what we're up against. But my cold water part is this. We're coming up against all these wonderful ways of reaching out to the addict. And believe me, I well remember police departments and what happened with addicts not all that many years ago. But there are 17, or were in Snohomish County, 17 detox beds until recently. Now I'm talking about public beds. I'm not talking about private. Obviously, if you have great insurance, you're in wonderful shape. There are 17 detox beds in King County. There's 17 detox beds in Pierce County. There's 17 detox beds in Spokane County. Most of the other counties in between have little to nothing, if anything, unless they make some kind of a deal with the hospital. That costs some money. I was delighted to hear the chief talk about the cost, because every social services cost that it comes out of your pocket is coming out of primarily the addiction community. And Department of Justice statistics is very clear, and has been for years, that the prison population is 85% and more related to addiction issues, both direct result or secondary cause of addiction. That's not new, you know, it's old information. Now, when your officers get these addicts who want treatment, it's going to take getting into, and again, we're talking about public money, not private insurance. They have to get it, they have to get detoxed first. They have to have an assessment. Then they have to wait after detox until somebody finds them a bed. And with the meth, the heroin, and the fentanyl, I can guarantee you 28-day treatment 90% of the time's not gonna cut it. So help me God, it's not. So now we're faced with the issue of where are we going to put these people once we hopefully can get them through at least more than 5 days of detox. And there's no beds. And here we run up against the brick wall. There are few beds, if any, that you can get people into treatment. I could put 100 beds and it would still be a drop in the bucket.
I really appreciate that. I want to see if there's any more questions right over here.
Hi, my name's Christy. I'm a registered nurse at Harborview Medical Center, so I see a lot of patients who have opioid addiction. I'm a nurse working in an office-based opioid treatment program at Harborview, so we run a Suboxone program. I would really advocate the city to consider that safe consumption site. That is an evidence-based practice, proven way to get people into treatment. It's low barrier, it gets folks in the door and talking about their problem. It also saves us all money by law enforcement costs, hospital costs. People can be taught safe consumption methods so they're not coming into the hospitals with those abscesses or endocarditis or these terrible infections that cost us a ton of money in public health. So I would really like us to look at that for our community. I know it doesn't always feel good to say we're giving people a place to inject their drugs, but it is cost saving and it's humane. And it is, as I said, evidence-based, and it works.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a couple on the cards. So one of the questions for the panel is, if I carry Narcan and I inject the Narcan, am I responsible in any way if something happens to the individual? And should I, as an average citizen, should it be something that I carry?
So first, as an average citizen, if you have any, if there's any chance that you could save a life, I would say absolutely carry it, right? Real quick story, a woman I was at a training that I did last year, she didn't think she'd ever need Narcan or naloxone, and she went to Safeway in Smoky Point, and somebody was laying on the sidewalk. And she called 911 because she knew the law enforcement officers had Narcan. And then she called and she was like, where can I get that again? Because I never thought I'd ever need it. So there's that. Out on the table, I did bring in the Good Samaritan law for anybody who wants to take a look at that. It has the RCW on a sheet of paper that covers you. So the Good Samaritan law says that if you use Narcan in good faith for somebody you believe is having an opiate overdose, that you have no liability. So are you covered legally? Yes. Can you get in trouble for giving Narcan? No. Part of that reason is, this mic is so much better than that one. Part of that reason is the only thing that Narcan does is knock those opiates off the receptors in the brain. That's it. If I'm having a heart attack and you don't know if I'm having an opiate overdose or if I'm having a heart attack and you give that to me, it will not affect my heart attack. It won't help me. It won't hurt me. The only thing that drug does is knock those opiates off the receptors and block those receptors for 20 to 90 minutes, giving the person a chance to breathe and to get medical help there.
Giving sugar to a diabetic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? I've got a couple more. Yes.
I have a personal question for you, Ben, and if feel free if you don't want to answer it, that's perfectly fine. At any point in your withdrawal or the worst part of your drug use, did you blame someone? Was there anyone that you said, this is this person's fault?
Not during the withdrawal, but multiple times I've always blamed other people for my problems, you know. The withdrawal, not so much. It's hard to concentrate on anything besides the pain and the sickness that you're in. Like, was the question specifically, like, did I blame them for how I felt right at that moment?
Do you blame someone for becoming addicted?
Oh, I know it sounded like I blamed my parents a lot right there. I was just trying to describe my family life. I don't really blame anybody. I mean, so I'm just going to kind of say, like, everyone is kind of addicted to something, you know what I mean? Like, whether it's food or money or drugs or power so I don't know. Can you blame somebody for an addiction? I don't know. I don't think so. Sorry to throw it right back at you there. No, we do a lot of work in NA to realize that we cause our own problems. That's like what the 4th step is about, and then doing your 5th step, it's all about, you list out all the people that have hurt your feelings. It's called the resentment. You list out all your resentments towards people, and then you do a couple columns, and then you write down what your part in it was. And I've always had a part in any person that's hurt me. I've always had a part in that. So it's that's part of it.
probably have time for one or two more questions. Any more from the audience? So another question that came in, so if you're a family member or it's yourself and you've had a drug overdose and you call 911, is there fear of being arrested as a result of that? And so it's one of the things that I think people are afraid of, that oh my God, I either me or someone, and I don't want them arrested, but they need help. So is there a connection there?
So again, with the Good Samaritan law, and that is also out on that same sheet of paper. So the way the Good Samaritan law reads basically is if I am with somebody and I'm using as well or not, and they're overdosing and I call 911, then I will not be charged with possession of the drug or paraphernalia. So, and neither will the person who's overdosing. And that was created so that people would quit shoving people in bushes and dropping them off in the car and that type of thing, so that they would not be afraid to call for help. Now, that being said, if I have other legal issues or I have weapons that I'm not supposed to have, or, you know, a variety of other things, I could still be charged with other crimes, or if I have a warrant out, but I will not be charged for that. And that's in writing again out on the table if you're interested in that.
Great. Well, that's the list of questions I have. Anything else? I have one more here.
Just a quick follow-up. So what was it that turned the corner at NA for you? A lot of people, you know, are required to go as part of treatment or give it a try, but they're resistant. What was it for you that caused you to embrace it?
Well, like originally when I was 19 and I first started going, it was because that's what they were like pushing at treatment, and what turned the corner was that I knew that what I was doing wasn't working, and I was just kind of willing to like do whatever it took to stop going down the path that I was going, and that was what was recommended. And then what really cemented it was that the life that I have now is a good example, but the rewards you get. So NA is a place where you can go and you can be high and go to the meetings and not fear like people calling the cops. I mean, unless you're like there being violent or something, but if you're just there to get help, like you can go there high and we'll take you out to dinner, you know. Usually after meetings there's like fellowship time, and I've never felt by people that were clean when I was high, I've never felt such love, you know. And that's kind of what I see time and time again in the rooms. Someone will come in new, or they'll come in high, or they'll come in with 1 day, with 1 hour, you know, sick, and people just kind of scoop them up, you know. And I've seen a lot of good in the rooms, you know. I mean, there's bad stuff too. It's not all good, you know. There's drama and cliques, but for the most part, everyone's just there to help each other out. So yeah.
One last one.
This question is for Ben. It's another follow-up question. When you were young and you started on your path, your gateway into drug use, do you think there would have been an intervention early on that could have prevented you from going on the path? And can you imagine, you know, if there was an intervention available, is there an intervention that we could design for young people today, if we had limited money or if we had unlimited money and resources?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. I'm not sure. The only thing that I can think of that would have stopped me from doing drugs is if I knew then what I knew now, you know? Because when I was that age, I thought I knew everything. Like, I remember telling my dad my friend was going to get like a settlement from a car accident, and I was like, he was like, you can't hang out with him anymore. I'm like, don't ruin this for me, Dad. You know, like saying like the dumbest crap ever. And now realizing that I was just like a scared kid that didn't know how to control his feelings or his anger, you know, so. Yeah, I can't think of anything, to be honest. I mean, I think that what you guys are doing as far as, like, doing the education on it, because like when I was a kid, we had the DARE program, but it was more just like a, you know, like a police officer would come in and he'd be like, don't do this, 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 and this, you know. Whereas now there's more education and there's more dialogue about people understanding like the nature of it instead of just like that it's just this horrible thing. You know, like she touched on how addicts were treated just a couple, you know, not that long ago in jails, and now people are realizing that it's like this huge epidemic instead of just these isolated incidents, you know. So yeah, it's kind of like a whole, there's no easy solution to the addiction thing at all. It's always going to be around, in my opinion, and it'll never not be around, but the more people know about it, and the better, because then there won't be like that stigma, like what she was talking about. It's that stigma and that sense of like outsideness that keep people like in the underworld, you know, like out there doing crime and stuff, where if there's another avenue that they can do. And also she touched on like the beds and stuff. First, like, you know, there is only so many public beds. People don't have health insurance. It's really hard to get clean. I knew for me it took going to at least a 28-day treatment to get a little time away from the drugs to be able to stay clean. It was like a little jump start. So that was their long answer for your short question.
All right, well, we've come up on the time. I want to thank the panel very much for your time this evening. I've learned a tremendous amount. And thanks to Community Conversations. This is a grassroots effort by our community. Thank you very much for doing that, and I hope that we see more in the future, and we certainly appreciate the efforts of our community members that put this together. Thank you for coming. Have a lovely evening.